the big thing I think here, Clay, is like you said, with 100% rating scheduler, many folks will just transition over to the permanent and total. The biggest exception to that would probably be cancer. If your only real rating is cancer and you're rated at 100%, then you go into a remission. Then they're just going to look at your residuals and
Mm-hmm.
rate you on that. Why? Here's the question. Why does a claim that you file for have a future exam, right? So in some cases, they may think or have evidence of a specific condition that could get better with treatment, like you were alluding to with the skin condition, right? So in some cases, it's not saying, oh, you're cured, but maybe you don't warrant a 60% rating anymore for that condition. Maybe you now warrant a 30 because we've got it kind of under control. So GERD would be a good example for that. So one, if you just get diagnosed and you've been diagnosed for a year and you file your claim for GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, on today's rating schedule, here we are in April of 2024, 60% is the maximum. Maybe you got 60% out the gate, but they want to see you again in, like Clay said, two to almost 5 years to see if you still rate that 60 or if they should downgrade you to 30. That downgrade could reduce your overall, and then that's why they want to do that. So this is why it is extremely important for each and every one of us, especially if you're a 100% scheduler. Continue to go to your doctor, continue to document your condition, continue to have those conversations. And also, in some cases, and again, this is a nuanced situation, right? Clay and I could sit here probably and spend all day talking about different examples of veteran A, veteran B, veteran C, everybody different, right? So you could have one veteran that has every single condition except for one. That one is teetering. They need to make it to the 5 years, right? Then finally they make it to the 5 years. It stayed the same. Bam, they get permanent and total. The other, maybe they have two conditions, right? Tinnitus for 10%, which doesn't mean anything, and cancer. They're 100%. But now the cancer goes into remission, and now it's reduced to like a 30% or something. So that person needs to look at other conditions that they could be filing for during this period of time that they're 100% scheduler. Like this is your moment in time to look at other things. I understand you're focused on your cancer, you're dealing with that. Lean on your spouse, lean on a loved one, lean on a veteran service officer to help you find other conditions that you could file for, because inevitably, hopefully, with the grace of God, you're going to fall into remission, right? I mean, that's the goal. Well, then that comes with a lower payment that you got used to. So, and you might not be able to go back to work. So, oh, by the way, you want to have a couple higher conditions in there that you could leverage for TDIU. So there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to leave it at that, Clay, for 100% scheduler and just how important it is. I think if you could just recap a couple of the important bullet points to remember, if you reach that scheduler 100, just do a couple recaps for us, and then we'll move over to permanent and total and contrast it.
Yep, absolutely, I will. And I want to add the most common 100% condition that's not static that I've seen just over the last few years. So to recap 100%, right? You have disabilities that are not static that is pushing you to 100%, which is both good and bad, right? The number one thing, and I love how you mentioned it because it's what I was going to say as well. The first thing I'm doing if I have 100% not P&T, I'm going to request my rating code sheet, whether through a VSO or through the RO. That is the absolute first thing I'm going to do. The second thing I'm going to do is figure out which ones aren't static, and I'm going to hyper focus my healthcare around that condition. And there's an elephant in the room, because what if that condition truly does get better, right? There is no gaming the game. And if you cross that line, the VA will come down on you very, very hard. So I just want to say that. But if that condition truly is one, either not getting better, so staying the same, or getting worse, you need to have evidence, because the VA is going to look for evidence. That's most important. And the most common condition I see at 100% by itself is mental health that is usually not static. I'm not saying it can't be static. Obviously, in your very severe cases, you would see that, but it's not natural for a human to be able to not function at that 100% criteria for an extended period of time. Now, obviously, if that is you, I'm going to be real, that really sucks, and I'm sorry. But most people, right, will recover from a serious mental illness, an SMI, to at least function at that 70% rate as mental health is currently rated in April of 24. So that's probably the most common one I see that veterans are like, oh, I'm 100%, but not P&T. It's probably because they have a routine future exam for mental health. But other than that, um, we can transition into P&T, and I'll go ahead and start this one. P&T is the exact opposite, right? So according to VA math, your static conditions equal to 100%, and obviously that's 95% because we're looking at VA math, right? So you are 94%. All your conditions are static. You submit a claim for rhinitis, you get 10%. That's static. All of a sudden, you're at 95. Boom, now you are at 100% static, which is permanent and total. Static means the condition is not likely to improve over the span of your life. And I already know someone's going to comment, what about my knees? Are they static? One, we don't know. Okay, we can't answer that. But those questions always come up. And two, conditions by themselves, generally speaking, are not static or not static. It depends on you and your evidence and your severity of that condition, right? So let's take your knee. If you have knee strain for whatever reason, that may or may not be static, right? If you have missing cartilage that's deteriorated because of arthritis or whatever is happening, that's not going to heal, right? So naturally, that's going to be static. And you can kind of take that concept for any condition and say, hey, is this likely to heal? And just think about it from a non-medical standpoint. And most are going to lean on that static side. But regardless, get your rating code sheet if you're not P&T. That would be my advice. Now, transitioning to benefits, and I'll really hit on the property tax, and it goes back to what we had already talked about, Jason, in the beginning. It's not just $3,700 a month, and with dependents, let's just call it $4,000, right? For easy math, it's not just $4,000 a month. It's property tax. Okay, now it's $4,500, right? Because you get that $500 back in your pocket using $500 as property tax. All right, well, it's your annual car tax. You have a brand new car that's $60,000. I don't know what property tax it is. We're just going to call it $2,000 because I can't do quick math, right? So that's $6,500. All of a sudden, $4,500 of it is monthly, $2,000 is annually, and little things like that will add up. P&T is the goal, right? And I hate saying that, but P&T is the goal for any veteran submitting disability claims, that assumingly they would rate that P&T mark. I'm going to stop there because that's going to go downhill real quick because I do want to say something on that, but go ahead and take it, Jason.
You know what? I agree with you. And here's the thing. Again, many of us shortchange ourselves because we think, well, I would have had this anyway. My mom had migraines, my grandma, whatever, right? So we make these weird excuses, or, you know what, I'm getting older, no wonder my back hurts, or whatever the case is. Anything that can be traced back to, I first started kind of feeling odd about whatever, or I hurt myself, or I started getting heartburn, or I started getting migraine, whatever you can trace back to it first started during my time in service. Now, I will tell you this, just because you think that it started then doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an easy case to prove, right? So there is that, right? You're going to run into that problem, and you're going to have issues in some cases, but it doesn't mean don't try, right? The answer is always no if you don't try. I think the moral of this story is, if you feel as though you had a condition that first manifested during your time in service or as a result of your time in service, you should absolutely do everything you can do to get it service connected. And I don't care if it's a 0%, a 10%, a 60% rating, right? back to your kind of little rant on things that you hate verbiage wise. I hate high value claims.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, it means don't look at other things, only focus on those. Well, focus on those and then you have an 80%, but if you would have did the other ones, you might have been 100, right? So file for what you deserve, file for what you have, file for the things that you got going on, right? The things that you can prove.